moves to exclude the statement by Mr. Awbrey, specifically, "I do not know who you think you are, but you need to understand something. Everything under this roof is mine." The defendant makes this motion on the basis that the statement was obtained as an unlawful arrest made by Officer Hayden West. This statement was a but-for causation of the arrest and therefore was a fruit of the poisonous tree. On March 7, 2016, Officer Hayden West, while in Uniform A at Taste of Tantera, and observed an interaction between Cameron Awbrey and his employee Lynn Stark. Officer Hayden West exited the restaurant while outside was asked by Cameron, "How did you enjoy the food?" And Officer West answered, "I like the food all right, but I hate how you treat your employees." Taken aback by this verbal chastisement, a verbal argument ensued between the defendant and Officer West, reacting with what can only be described as retaliatory abuse to his authority. Officer West told Cameron Awbrey to shut up and said, "You won't yell at me that way. Do you know who I am?" For no apparent reason, nor probable cause, Officer West decided to do a name check on Cameron Awbrey in the police database, indicating that it was a retaliatory intimidation tactic by the officer. While the name Cameron Awbrey showed an outstanding warrant for petty theft. However, the physical description of the subject of the warrant was not entirely consistent with the appearance of Mr. Awbrey. Instead of waiting for the additional information that Mr. Awbrey was the subject, Officer West recklessly proceeded with the arrest and placed Mr. Awbrey in the back of the patrol car. There was no indication that Mr. Awbrey was Mirandized. 10 minutes into the drive, Officer West received additional information that confirmed Mr. Awbrey West was not the subject of the warrant, but instead of releasing him and apologizing, Officer West told him, "Your lucky day, but I still think that you're abusive to your cook." Cameron reflexively responded with the statement that is the subject of this motion. The statement Mr. Awbrey made to Officer West, "Everything under this roof is mine," must be excluded because the statement was made as the result of an unlawful and retaliatory arrest by Officer West, and was the but-for cause of the statement. Therefore, it must be excluded as it was fruit of an unlawful and unmirandized arrest, as stated in Taylor v. Alabama.
1 minute.
Keep going.
Where the police arrested the defendant without probable cause and without warrant as occurred in the case. The legality obtained evidence was excluded. Additionally, in Wong Sun v. U.S., the verbal statement made by the defendant based on an unlawful arrest were also excluded at trial as a violation of the defendant's constitutional rights. The facts in this case are even more egregious, is that the word? Egregious, and the statement must therefore be excluded from this trial. The prosecution may try to revive the statement because based on the test found in Utah versus Street, which ruled that the evidence is admissible if the link between the evidence and the unlawful arrest is attenuated. However, based on the test set forth in test above the case, the prosecution fails to meet this burden. First test, amount of this time between the unlawful stop and statement. In this case, most of the time had passed from the time of the unlawful arrest to the time Mr. Awbrey made the statement. Second test. Intervening
30 seconds.
circumstances between unlawful stop and unlawful arrest. While a subsequent legal arrest was obtained in sheriff, which constituted a intervening circumstance, no such intervening event occurred in this case. The third test, the degree
Stop.
of
Okay. You know what, Kaylee?
May it please the court, I don't know who you think you are, but you need to understand something. Everything underneath that roof is mine, should be admissible in court and was given willingly by the defendant. Despite the claims to the contrary by the petitioners, the statement was not a result of an unlawful arrest. Officer Hayden West was an occasional customer of Taysom Zatara, would often witness the defendant Cameron Awbrey verbal assault and berate the cook of his restaurant, Lynn Stark. Officer West had looked him up at the database and had discovered that he had an outstanding warrant. After he mentioned to what he saw to the defendant responded in verbal abusive manner towards the officer. In order to get control of the situation, Officer West requested the petitioner to calm down and make sure there was no outstanding warrant. Officer West acted lawfully based on the information given to him in which he was arrested, Cameron Awbrey, and began driving to the station. New information based on the warrant on the way was given that the suspect had a tattoo on his left arm of an American eagle. Upon further inspection, Officer West realized that this Cameron Awbrey was not the subject of the warrant. Officer West informed the defendant was no longer in custody when he told him that it was his lucky day, but I still think you treat your employees poorly. Without any questioning, and while no longer in custody, defendant Cameron Awbrey made a statement that he was no longer the subject of this motion. At this point, when the Officer West informed that the defendant was no longer in custody, when he had mentioned that it was his lucky day, he was no longer the reasonable person who would believe that they would no longer be in custody. At this stage in the case, Thompson versus Goldhang, Cameron Awbrey should have reasonable belief that he was at liberty to determine
2 minutes.
the conversation, which Officer West at this point had informed him that he was no longer the subject of the police warrant. In case Brown versus Illinois, the verdict was admissible based on both at the Fourth and Fifth Amendment state that the statement would be admissible on the fact that it was given voluntarily by the defendant's own free will, in which Cameron Awbrey's actions display the same actions that the defendant in case Brown versus Illinois was free to go after Officer West made that U-turn and told him it was his lucky day. Therefore, Cameron was given knowledge that he was no longer in custody. In Rhode Island versus Ennis, at this case, the conversation itself between the officer and Cameron Awbrey does not meet the standards of an interrogation. The court ruled that interrogation refers any words or actions on the part of the police are reasonably likely to elicit incriminating response.
A minute.
At this point, Cameron Awbrey was just talking to Officer West, when he gave his statement. Officer West's statement, I think you're an abusive cook, does not constitute an interrogation, nor was it reasonable for Officer West to believe it will elicit the response of the defendant. The defendant may try to argue that the arrest itself was illegal and any evidence obtained thereafter, including the statement, will constitute the fruit of the poisonous tree. It was obtained lawfully,
30
therefore,
seconds.
it was no fruit of the poisonous tree. There was no intent after Cameron Awbrey was let go. However, should the court find that the arrest was non-valid, the statement still should be allowed under the theory of attenuation. In the case Utah versus Deerfield, the defendant was unlawfully stopped, but the officer discovered an outstanding warrant. As a result, the defendant was searched and sentenced to an unlawful arrest. Incriminating evidence was found. Therefore, the statement should be allowed by the defendant, Cameron Awbrey, into this case because it was given lawfully and it was obtained without force. Therefore, I ask that it should be granted.
Thank you, counsel.
My name is Dulce Hernandez. I represent the people of the prosecution side. In this case, Yvonne Stark, illegal immigrant with a dying sister who is desperate to support her. She was laid off from her job and needed a solution. She saw the ad given by Mr. Awbrey and saw that it was a golden opportunity. Her mother and herself used to cook the required cuisine and had no type of training. Mr. Awbrey interviewed Lynn Stark, ending the interview with a particular question: Would anyone miss you if you were gone? Lynn received the job under a few conditions. Firstly, she was required to live in a non-incubated apartment above the establishment, with an automatic locking door, bars in the window, missing bathroom door, broken plumbing, and a slight mildew smell. Secondly, she had to work 19 hours a day, 7 days a week, on her feet endlessly. And lastly, she was forced to give up her legal documents, including her visa, which was coming closer to expiring after every passing day. She had never received her documents back, even after 4 months of employment. After a normal day at work, Lynn received word that her sister was searching her faith. She needed to be with her sister after work. After work, she requested 2 things from Mr. Awbrey: her legal papers and time off to see her sister. He denied both requests. Lynn, out of anger, stormed off to her room, where Cameron Awbrey slammed the automatic locking door behind her. The next morning, Lynn wakes up to see her door still locked. No problem, she had her own key. She looked where she saw it last. To her surprise, the key was gone. She was trapped. Frank and Lyman will argue that she saw Cameron leaving Lynn's room when Lynn was not there. Desperate, Lynn wrote a note which said, "Help me, I'm treated like a slave."
Thank you.
Thank you, counselor.
Good morning, my name is Joanna Lopez, and it's my privilege to represent Cameron Awbrey in this case before you today. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a bad businessman being mistaken for a criminal. So, Your Honor, the prosecution has claimed that my client is a human trafficker. However, my client was just simply misunderstood. He has no prior experience in how to run or operate a restaurant. Of course, with all that he had to handle and all the stress that he had afterwards, it was only a matter of time until he cracked into the stress of trying to run his establishment. So, the defense will call 4 witnesses to the stand. First will be Mr. Devin Taylor, who will testify that my client had such a deep connection with Tantera that he did humanitarian work in his teen years as part of a youth group. And Ms. Frankie Lyman, who will testify that my client would never intentionally harm any of his employees. And Mr. Addison Frey, who will testify that the findings made by Dana Greyjoy are inaccurate. At the conclusion of the case, we will ask you to find that my client is innocent. The state has not met its burden of proof, and we would ask for a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counselor. Very well stated. Counselor, please proceed.
Can you please state your name for the court?
Lynn Stark.
And where are you originally from?
I come from Tantera.
And how is it in Tantera?
In Tantera, the economy is pretty bad.
How bad would you say?
Well, for one, there isn't too many job opportunities over there. It's hard to make money also.
Okay. So why did you come to the U.S.?
I came to the U.S. to support my old sister and my aging mother, as well as my niece.
And when you first came to the U.S., you found a job.
Yes, I did.
Where did you originally work?
I worked as a housekeeper in a hotel.
And why did you leave?
I was laid off in October, actually.
Okay. So after you were laid off, you went to find another job, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you found the Taste of Tantera?
Yes, I saw it on an ad.
And how did your interview go?
Well, I spoke with the restaurant owner, Cameron Awbrey, and we rearranged the interview, and he asked me a few personal questions and my reasons for coming here.
Did he ask any unusual questions?
Yes, he asked me if anybody in Little Tantera would miss me.
And how did you reply to that?
I told them no because I don't have any close friends or relatives in this area.
Okay. So when you got the job, Cameron provided you with housing, correct?
Yes.
Did he give you a key?
Yeah, he gave me a key that's attached to a lanyard for a door that's an automatic lock.
An automatic lock?
Yes.
Okay. And how was the apartment complex?
Well, it's like a prison cell.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, the windows had security bars on the outside. The room reeked of mildew. It had peeling paint. Had one single folded bed. The bathroom door was missing. Had plumbing problems, a leaking faucet.
And did you mention this to Cameron?
Yeah, I told him if I could fix it anyhow, but he just slapped in my face and said with what money.
Okay. Now, when you officially started working, how did things progress?
Well, at first, me and Cameron Awbrey would get along, but he started rushing me with orders, yelling at me to pick up my pace, and I wouldn't get any breaks either.
Did he do this to any other employees?
Not that I witnessed, no.
Okay. And I understand that in the beginning you and Cameron had a good relationship.
Yes.
How did that change?
That happened once the restaurant opened. Things became so stressful. I wasn't allowed to leave the restaurant at all, and like I said, I was always rushed to keep doing my orders over and just very quick.
So Cameron had put restrictions on you?
Yeah, he told me I was not allowed to leave the restaurant.
And through all this, how did you feel mentally and physically?
I started to become very depressed. I had anxiety too. Had back pain and neck pain from that single folded bed I was given. Just really stressed.
And did Cameron ever think about hiring an assistant chef?
No, he never even brought up the idea of doing that.
And how many hours were you working?
I was working over 90 hours per week.
Is Cameron aware that that's illegal?
Yeah, I'm sure he is aware.
Okay. Now, on March 10th, I understand that you gave Officer Hayden West a note.
Yes, I slipped him a note under his food.
Can you please state what the note had read?
I wrote to him, "Please help me, I'm being treated like a slave."
Okay. No more further questions, yeah.
Please proceed.
All right. Ms. Stark, when you were in Tantera, you were going to college, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
What were you studying?
I was studying accounting.
Okay. Let's fast forward a bit. You got a job in a hotel, right?
Yes, as a
You were laid off?
Yes, in October.
So you looked for a job and you applied to Taste of Tantera, right?
Yes, I did.
You got an interview?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, you were hired subsequently too, right?
What was that?
You were hired too?
Yes.
And how much were you paid for your first months of work?
I was paid $500 the first month.
You think that was enough?
I did not think that was enough for me.
Now what about the next month?
$400.
That was even less, right?
Yes, that was.
What about January?
400.
And February?
Another 400.
And you had experience in finance, right? You studied accounting?
Yes.
So you didn't leave using with your experience, you didn't decide to leave because of terrible pay?
No, I wanted to support my little sister.
So you said you had
Excuse me, Counselor, I'm sorry. You might think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just want to be able to hear your voice. Thank you.
So you said you had to support a family, yet you stayed at a job where there was terrible pay?
I had my visa taken away from me.
All right. Now you also said you couldn't leave, right?
Yeah, I couldn't leave the restaurant.
But you were able to leave at night to send money home to your family.
Yes, because it was like the closing of the store.
But you were able to leave the restaurant.
Yes.
Now, March 9th, you asked Cameron about your sister. Yes, you go see her?
Yes, I went to
And you two had an argument.
Yes,
And in a fit of anger, he slammed the door behind you.
yes.
Now, what time did you come down the next morning?
I came down the next morning at 7,
6:30.
6:30.
Yeah. And you found the door was locked?
Yes, it was locked.
Were you aware that the door had been locked all night?
No,
And what time did Cameron get to the restaurant and let you out?
7:30.
So it was 7. So essentially, you were locked in there for only 30 minutes.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Counselor.